Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, cool. If you need me to speak louder, just go like this in the audience so I know. So yeah, how's everybody doing? Good? Awesome. Thank you all for coming out tonight. You know, it's always great to see so many people interested in taxes. Yeah, so my name is Jordon McKoy, and I'm the co-founder and head of engineering at Benji. And tonight, we're going to be talking about struggle. But first, let me take you back in time. So earlier this year, in January, we launched Canada's first neobank for small businesses. We had clients signing up from across Canada, and we had raised funding from individuals like Mike Catchin of Wealthsimple, Jeannie Lam of Wattpad, and Derek Fung of Drop. We grew our team from just 2 founders, myself and Mohammed, to a team of 8, with half of that being developers. It was an exciting time. We had an innovative product, and we're gaining momentum. You know, things were really looking up until they weren't. Around mid-April, our banking-as-a-service partner, who provided our core banking functionality, shut down. So we had to migrate our users off of our beta app and close our accounts, and our team shrunk back down to 2, leaving the founding members to pick up the pieces. So it's a difficult moment in our journey, and we took some time to reflect and look at what went wrong. So we asked ourselves, what can we take from this experience and move forward with? So after doing some reflection, we recognized that we made some mistakes. We made a bet on a new and exciting yet unproven platform. You know, sometimes the first mover advantage works out, and other times it doesn't. We've become a little skeptical of these platforms, and moving forward, if we were to consider going that route again, we'd prepare a backup plan or an exit strategy. Number 2, we grew our team a little bit too quickly. We should have kept our team a lot smaller to start, but it can get easy to be caught up in a hiring frenzy when you have money in the bank. But for us, it just led to a lot of inefficiencies and burned capital. And finally, we expected that there would be bottlenecks when building in the banking space, but we were still surprised with the lack of enablement that we faced with Benji Financial. And moving forward, we want to limit building in heavily regulated markets unless we were well-funded and able to move quickly. So we want to explore what our next steps are going to be. And we knew as entrepreneurs ourselves that we still feel the pain of having to use software that's designed for accountants and not builders. So again, we wanted to keep building software for entrepreneurs. But this time, we weren't going to tie our destiny to another single piece of technology for survival. So we want to focus on well-established systems that were able to allow us to enter multiple markets. And we wanted to set our sights a little broader and solve problems for as many entrepreneurs as we could. So we figured the best way to do this was by choosing a pain point that was common, maybe a little bit every day, that a lot of entrepreneurs faced. We asked ourselves, how can we make something that was boring, interesting, and engaging? So we went back and forth on a number of ideas and visions for what our next step should be, but we kept coming back to the same question. What would a money coach for your business do if it were an app? This was a large question, and we decided to reduce the scope of that and start with an app that finds tax write-offs for creators in Canada and the US. I mean, again, what can be more boring than taxes, right? So currently, we're in beta and adding new creators every week. And with that, I'm going to jump into a demo. And in the past, I've been notoriously bad with live demos, so I've decided to record a video for this evening. And hopefully that goes well. So when a new creator downloads the app, they can choose whether they're in Canada or the US, and they begin answering a number of questions to personalize their tax profile. And what this does is allows us to cater our tax engine to their business and find them the most relevant tax write-offs. So as you can see right now, this user is going through and answering some questions. And when they get to the end of that questionnaire, they can create their account. They then connect their bank. And once connected, we start receiving their transactional data, and we start enriching it and running it through our tax engine. And then at the end of that process, they get to meet Benji, their personalized bookkeeping chatbot. So after answering a couple questions, they learn how to review their transactions, and just like that, their first one is done. They can then see their progress. I have a little GIF there. They can then see their progress on their dashboard to see the running total of tax write-offs. So going back through, let's review a few more transactions and speed through it a little bit. And then heading back to the dashboard, they can see, oh, just restart the video there. They can see even more accumulated tax write-offs. So yeah, that concludes the demo. So this is currently available right now in beta. And again, we're pretty happy with where things are right now, but it did not start out like that. So for context, when building Benji Financial, it took us 8 long months of development to launch, and then only at that point could we start receiving user feedback. And again, for startups, this is just way too slow. So when building the chatbot, we knew we wanted to prioritize user feedback and getting something out as soon as we could. So by limiting the scope, we were able to get our proof of concept app launched in only a couple months with myself as a lone developer. And this was awesome, and we thought this was a great achievement because we were able to move fast. But once the app was out, the launch did not go as smooth as we had hoped, and our struggles continued. So in designing the new system, again, with one dev, we knew we need to keep the infrastructure simple and our deployment process simple as well. Didn't have a lot of time to be configuring Circle CI. And again, we wanted to launch in Canada and the US to be available to as many entrepreneurs as possible, so multi-region support was important from the start. And again, we're dealing with financial data, so privacy and security are table stakes, and it's something we could not compromise on. We want to prioritize speed of development, so things like tests, tracing, analytics, instrumentation were all deprioritized. So that's a little foreshadowing there. And again, we want to reuse what we could. Just because this was a new app, we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. We already invested 8 months of development in capital in our previous app, so we want to make the most of that investment. So this architecture diagram is what we end up launching with for our alpha product. So for Benji Financial, we use React Native. We didn't have any iOS or Android developers, but wanted to build once and deploy anywhere. And we had a component library that we had built for that, so we just decided to stick with React Native and keep moving forward with that. On the back end, we, again, used the previous technology that we had, and we used Go to power our monolith API and reach for a few third-party services to keep things going, like the identity provider. Again, wanting to leave security to people that had time to do it full time, right? Something that was really new for us was deploying on App Engine. We found deployments on App Engine were a lot easier for us and faster. We didn't have to worry about managing containers and building them. We could just push up code, Google will orchestrate things for us, and we had the added benefit of, at this point in our life, the traffic might not be the most, so it'll scale down when no one's using it, and we can save some money there. I did read about some latency issues, when the container has to spin up. But again, at this stage, it's not the biggest concern, so we just went ahead with it. So fast forwarding again to launch day, Mo and I signed up on production. Things went as I expected, and no surprises. So we started inviting people to sign up. But as more people joined, things in the app started to get really weird. And as we saw in the demo, after personalizing tax profile, creators would create an account, connect their bank account, we'd receive their transactional data and begin enriching it. And once complete, again, they meet Benji, complete the onboarding, review transactions. At least that's how things are supposed to go. What actually happened was once people started joining, our system fell over repeatedly. And yeah, it all started with latency. The chatbot would take really long to respond to users, up to a minute at sometimes, if it decides to respond at all. Some of our users jokingly questioned if Benji was ghosting them. So I started to investigate what went wrong. But remember, again, I had limited logs and metrics because the business had prioritized getting user feedback and getting things out as quickly as possible, which meant we didn't have time to write a lot of tests or add a lot of tracing. So what I did have was GCP, Cloud SQL, was able to take a look at some of the metrics. And this was quite alarming. The database CPU utilization was running at 100%, and our connections were maxed out. In addition, we had a bunch of errors in our logs, and there were request cancellations. So every request has its own context, and these have been configured with a timeout. So whatever was happening was taking too long, causing this buildup of requests. And when they would all time out, there's this cascading cancellation event. Yeah, cancellations can be helpful for cases where you have users on your site, you're running an expensive operation, they leave, you'd rather just cancel things rather than keep running that expensive operation on your server. But again, in those cases, you're kind of designing your system to handle that and fail gracefully. That wasn't the case for us. So at this point, I still wasn't sure what the issue was. Was it code-related, a memory leak, a runaway loop? Was it infrastructure? App Engine, again, was a new choice. Could have been something that I had missed. And to make matters worse, I never saw these issues on on development or staging. So I went to investigate. And it's possible that I made an oversight. There was a long-running process on the server that would hog all the resources, and that was our enrichment process. So when a user connects their bank account and receives the transactional data, it's quite raw. So we clean it up, transform it, and then enrich it by adding some more contextual information. And the result is a transaction that's ready to be categorized for the creators. Unfortunately, enriching transactions was not asynchronous. So when the request is made, it wouldn't finish until all the transactions in that batch have been processed. So of course, this was timing out as more and more users were coming on and more transactions were in that batch. So this would leave the server in a state of limbo, and restarting the server was the only way to fix it. So again, I never noticed this in development or staging because locally, as I'm developing, I'm always restarting the dev server. And on staging, there just wasn't enough traffic or enough transactions in there. Coupled with the fact that I was getting kind of lazy, and rather than writing migrations in SQL all the time, I was just dropping all the tables and spinning back up again. So this really proved for us that App Engine was a poor choice. App Engine has constraints on how long of a timeout window you can set for the request, and that's at 30 seconds. And the enrichment process was running a little bit longer than that. We did dodge a bullet, though, because, again, with App Engine and the auto-scaling, when one instance starts to get overwhelmed, it will continually try to spin up instances to handle all the traffic. And that could have been a really expensive mistake. But thankfully, I had configured the max instances at 3. So, yeah, it wasn't too bad. So I said, you know what? Changing the infrastructure will be faster than rewriting all that business logic for the enrichment process. Plus, Compute Engine, which we end up switching to, allows for longer request timeout periods. So again, we just wanted to get this patched up to get users on to collect that feedback, right? We weren't worried about scale right now. So even though we were losing the auto-scaling capabilities of App Engine, it wasn't a priority for us. But unfortunately, deploying to Compute Engine isn't as easy, or it's more involved than deploying to App Engine. But as a benefit, we did get system monitoring capabilities from Compute Engine. And lastly, to combat the database connections, I configured the pool to have more limits and timeouts. But yeah, that didn't work. Requests were still timing out, still getting the context cancellation errors. But what surprised me was Compute Engine, looking at the system metrics, the CPU utilization was low, which was telling me that, you know what, maybe this isn't like an infrastructure problem, and it's code related. So I had to face facts. I don't write flawless code, and the enrichment process is too slow. So I thought, okay, cool. I know how to speed it up. We'll throw a cache in there. So instead of querying the database over and over again during the enrichment process, we'll put that data in a cache, and that should also reduce the amount of database connections and lower that CPU utilization for the database, resulting in no query timeouts, context won't get canceled, and Benji will stop ghosting users. Cache was a terrible idea, so I instead took a look at a queue. Unfortunately, the cache really just made the business logic harder to follow, so I abandoned it before even finishing the implementation. And again, with the queue, we got the added bonus of making the enrichment process asynchronous, which helped clean up the logic. But even that still didn't work. There's still no change in the front-end behavior. Context was still getting canceled, still getting the max database connection errors. At this point, it was time to add some tracing to get some visibility. Now, we had Sentry set up for error, for exception capturing, and there was some tracing set up there as well. So we had already ran out of, I think it's the 100,000 events that they give you in our plan. So we paid the $15, unlocked 150,000 more, and said, okay, great, now I got some tracing set up. I'll be able to see what's going on. Turn that on, and we ran out of 150,000 events in under 5 minutes. I messaged co-founder, messaged Mohammed, said, cool, just turned it on, and I triggered the enrichment process. Within like 3 minutes, notification, 80% done. 2 seconds after that, 100% gone. He messaged me, said, am I seeing the right thing? And unfortunately, that was the case. However, it was helpful. We did have a particular transaction come through. The name was unlabeled transaction. That wasn't very helpful, but it was being hit 111,000 times in under 5 minutes. Because the tracing was being configured at the controller level in our backend, I figured, you know what, this has to be the queue that was misconfigured that just keeps hammering that endpoint over and over. So I went to the queue, updated the configuration to limit the number of concurrent requests on those endpoints, and said, you know what, cool, I've got it. This has to be it. Still did not work. I was running around in circles at this point. I said, okay, let's go back to the database, but this time, let's take a look at the queries. And I found a particular query that was really expensive. And in the span, so I looked at it, triggered the enrichment process again. In the span of 10 seconds, this particular query was run 14,000 times. And to make matters worse, is returning 0 results. And I'm like, this has to be it. This has to be it. So I added some more logs around that query, found it, and again, we're a team of 1, so I didn't bother to do a git blame. Right? I knew who was responsible. And instead, I just went to work optimizing the query. I rewrote the business logic around it, and I was able to reduce the time complexity. For those wondering, it was somewhere around the cubic time. It was just, yeah, I'm not proud of it either. But did it work? I deployed the changes, which again reset the server, and then I triggered the enrichment process, but then I left for an hour to give time for the Cloud SQL metrics to collect. So an hour later, I came back to this beautiful site. Database utilization. Thank you. So yeah, database utilization, connections are both down. There's no burst in context cancellation in Sentry or the server logs. Finally got it. So a quick recap of what happened. When we launched our alpha, we noticed some weird behavior in the app and found drop connections in the server. So as a way to fix it, we changed the infrastructure of our transaction enrichment process through multiple iterations in an attempt to fix the issue. The solution ended up being adding tracing, cloud insights, and good old-fashioned logs to isolate the root cause and address the issue. This is a very painful reminder that local environments are not to be trusted. And for us, observability is not a nice to have. You know, the takeaway here is not me telling you, okay, write more tests, add more logs to your systems. I mean, these things are best practices for a reason, right? We all know that we should do them. However, we don't develop software in a vacuum. You know, regardless of your role, whether it's an individual contributor, a manager, or a founder, there will always be constraints external to the code. You know, whether it's from business, time, or money, they will limit what you're able to deliver. And you'll have to make some tough choices. But the reassuring thing is most of them will be good choices. But unfortunately, there will be bad choices, and you can only outrun them for so long. So when they do catch up to you, that's okay. You just have to struggle and pivot until you're through with them. But yeah, you just have to have a good understanding of what your pain tolerance is. And finally, yeah, your network is an invaluable resource. Again, as a solo developer on this project, I didn't have other devs on the team I could just Slack and ask them like, hey, what's going on? But I did have a network of really smart devs I was able to connect with and do some rubber duck debugging, walking them through the issues at a high level. So yeah, be sure to network tonight. You never know who's going to help you solve something in the future. But yeah, special shout out to Abby from CrowdRiff and Steve and Michael Thomas for their help. So where does that leave us today? You know, after working through our initial launch issues, we were able to make further improvements to the system and move to our beta launch. Since then, our database CPU utilization has still been consistently around 10%, and connections are super low. That improved observability has helped us to monitor and catch potential issues on staging before they're deployed to production. And this has resulted in higher confidence in our deployments, leading to more reliable experiences for our users. No more ghosting. So yeah, if you're interested in checking out our website or joining our waitlist, feel free to use the QR code. I'm not the most active on social media, but always happy to connect. And if you have any suggestions or criticisms on how we could have solved things differently, I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you again to DevCycle and Rangle for hosting and allowing me to present. And thank you all for listening. So yeah, we can move into Q&A. So
in the beginning you mentioned about untrusted platform. How can you define if something's trusted or not? How can you choose something that's so important in your application?
Yeah, I think at least for our banking as a service platform, we were the first ones to use it, right? There's no list of success stories or other people using it. We weren't able, there's no references. So I think, at least in terms of trust, like being able to look and say, hey, have other people been successful with this thing? And using that as a key metric there. Yeah.
So in the end, App Engine versus Compute Engine had nothing to do with your problem?
It would seem that way.
So is there any thought that you might go back to App Engine? Is there any advantage to you now?
It's definitely not ruled out. I think it might have been a little bit of a blessing to move off of it, to be honest. Again, as easy as it was to deploy, I think it does get a little bit more expensive just with it scaling up. And with that long-running process, we still have that there in our system. I think before we would move back to App Engine, we want to kind of separate that out, have that living on a server that doesn't scale down and just have App Engine serve endpoints that can fluctuate in traffic. Yeah.
Quick question. Why did you decide to put the entire questionnaire before the actual account creation step?
Yeah, I think, one, it helps us to understand a little bit better who's really interested and going through. But again, it helps us to get that data and start creating the profile, the tax profile, before the actual account creation.
Something like around eligibility, would you even end up in a situation where it's like, unfortunately, it makes no sense for you to make an account?
Yes, there is that for sure. Like right now, we are focused on sole proprietors, so unincorporated businesses. Right now, we don't serve corporations. So that would be a key blocker there for people going through.
Okay, that's appreciated.
Yeah.
You don't need to fill out, details before realizing it's useless.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's, I guess, a takeaway from building in the banking space. We're trying to not collect information just for the sake of collecting information, right? Only collect as much as absolutely necessary. Yeah.
I have a question along the similar lines. So there was that questionnaire, which is like part of the onboarding, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find a good balance for the number of steps there should be from a design point of view? And did you see any drop-off, like complete drop-off that you were not able to get done?
I think to properly answer this question, that's probably better suited for my co-founder, to be honest. He's really the brains behind the design aspects. But in terms of the metrics, we haven't noticed any steep drop-offs based on the way the questionnaire is set up right now. However, we are currently always tweaking it and experimenting. So,
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your story.
no problem. Thank you.
Are you tracking that though? Like if somebody gets partway through the question
Oh, yeah.
and abandons it, you know the abandonment point?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so again, tracing, I think from like a technical standpoint, we deprioritize, but analytics from user behavior, that was in there from day one. Yeah. Yeah.
How long was that resolution, that cycle?
2 stressful weeks. Yeah.
Were you able to figure out the number of users or the number of requests that would hit the incident that you were running into?
To be honest, it wasn't so much the number of users, it was the amount of, I guess, transactions in the database. Like the way it was set up, it would take a look at how many transactions we had when we're running the enrichment process on things sitting there. So again, with just myself or just Mohammed, there wasn't that much transactional data sitting in the database. Again, that was always being cleared. But as soon as we start hitting a critical point, every additional user was just causing this issue. But what that critical number was, no, I didn't spend too much time trying to figure out what that was. Yeah.
2 questions. First, what is something that you absolutely love as a solo developer working on a project, and what is something that you actually hate? And then you mentioned that you have a monolith architecture. Doing this, whole like troubleshooting, did you ever think about moving over to like, spinning up like different microservices? And if not, like, what were your reasons for not switching from monolith to distributed?
Yeah. One thing I really enjoy about being a solo developer on a project, I can be really lazy with commit messages. One thing I guess, again, the most difficult thing of being the solo dev is like there's nobody else to lean on. You kind of just have to do everything, and when you don't know how to do something, you have to figure it out. And then, yeah, you come back to it later, and you know it was you that wrote that code. So yeah, there's no one else to blame. That'd be the most difficult thing. In terms of monolith versus microservice, I think, at least at this stage, it's a little bit early to start splitting things up into microservices. Even within the monolith, I did try to organize things a little bit preemptively by like, splitting them out in silos and say, okay, cool, transaction goes here, tax profile goes here, business goes here. But I sliced it so narrowly that trying to access different parts of the monolith just created more boilerplate and overhead. So yeah, I ended up removing all that and kind of putting it into one service. Makes it a lot easier to access to code, a lot faster to develop, but in the future, as I think those lines get more and more well-defined, then we would look to start splitting things out into microservices. Yeah.
What's, if you came across this kind of problem again, is there anything you would do differently in terms of how you solve it?
For
They say hindsight's 20/20.
yeah, hindsight is 20/20. I think, yeah, all the cliches, everything, like once bitten, twice shy in terms of the platform thing. Hindsight's 20/20. I think, yeah, knowledge is power, right? And when this happened, we didn't have enough information as to where this was. We're just going off of hunches and just trying to follow a trail. So I would first start by looking at, okay, what do I know for certain? What assumptions are being made? And then trying to stamp out those assumptions. And then once that's a little bit clearer, then just hopefully the problem reveals itself. But if not, just trying to experiment around that. Yeah.
I'd imagine like tax codes are fairly labyrinthian. How do you like who does the encoding of where I can save money as a creator or an entrepreneur? Is it you? Is it your partner? Or is there some kind of intermediary?
Yeah, it's a mix of both. I definitely say he's more of the domain expert there, and then we kind of figure out how to codify that. Yeah.
So just so I understand, right now your business logic is just a series of decision trees. Is that the idea that it's, oh, if it's this, then go here, if it's this, go here, or is it a more, I don't know, the only rival I can think of is like maybe machine learning, something like that? If that's proprietary information.
Yeah, I'm trying to. There's a thin line here. I can't say too much, otherwise my co-founder's gonna kill me. But yeah, I think it's maybe a little bit more complicated or a little bit more involved than just a series of statements. Yeah.
This might be a little bit safer question.
Yeah.
What NLP tools were you using to do the chatbot?
Also on that line, but yeah, if you're interested in chatbots and like, I would recommend taking a look at something like Dialogflow. That's not an endorsement, but yeah. Go ahead.
Is there any reason why you chose chatbot as a way to deliver information to users compared to anything else?
Yeah, I think, again, going back to our brainstorming period and trying to find, again, how can we make something interesting and engaging. That was something that really stood out to us, and we figured, yeah, this would be a good way to go.
What's the output of your system? Like, does it create a log that I would give to an auditor to say that this is why my business lunch expense is what it is? Or is it that it actually creates accounting entries in my accounting system based on what I've answered to the chatbot? What does it actually do with the information?
Yeah, so to start, it would just be you get a tax report. At the end, you could take to something like Simple Tax or TurboTax and just enter those values into the fields. In terms of transactions that you're going through, you can add notes to the transactions to let you know, like, oh, this is business meal was with so-and-so, I ordered the steak or something. In the future, we'd move to having direct tax filing capabilities in the system. And yeah.
What are you thinking about monetizing on that? How your company is going to make money on that?
So this will be available through a subscription model, and that'll be the
like
first
a yearly
thing.
subscription? Like a yearly
Yeah.
subscription?
Yeah. So, yeah.
Based on taxation years, yeah?
Yes. Yes.
Have you received some certificates from audit companies that your user data is secured? Or you want to achieve one of these certificates?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of security certifications, that's definitely what we would move to. Again, another, I guess, tidbit that we learned from going through with Benji Financial is something like SOC 2 compliance or something that takes a long time. And it's not as easy as like someone just comes in one day and, gives you your paper. They will monitor over a period of time. I think at least right now, we just launched, so we haven't, enough time hasn't passed to start going down that path yet.
What is expected to be delivered, and is it expected to be potentially like replace tax accountants or tax advisor?
No, I mean, part of what we're also offering, that we also advertise on our website, is people get access to a bookkeeper through our app. So we want to build something that sits in between and really just makes everybody's life easier.
Yeah. And what is expected to be ready?
I don't have a concrete date for you yet. Yeah.
Like
If you
a year or 10 years?
I guess we're probably, yeah, my co-founder might kill me. Let's say like later this year, early next year for maybe a public launch, yeah.
Only Canada and US, right?
Canada and US, yeah.
Are you planning to expand further or?
For right now, probably just keep our sights on North America and then see how that goes. Yeah.
How many users are using the app working capital licensing?
Not as many as you would think. And that's also part of what was so like alarming at that time. Yeah, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head.
Then, like, what was your estimation when you designed the system and architecture? Like, how many users might that have?
It's a good question. Good system design interview question. Yeah, again, didn't have a number in mind. Again, the focus was just, okay, let's just build something, get it up, we'll iterate if it's too slow or we need to add more capabilities. So yeah, we didn't, or at least I didn't spend time looking at that.
Now that you have live history after that initial big problem, do you use that data for testing new changes to the back end? Like, let's say you say, here's a new data enforcement algorithm, here's what to do with these transactions. Can you like replay the prior month's real events to see is it going to handle it, as opposed to just testing and staging where there's not much going on?
Yeah, no, 100% we would, so I guess some form of load testing we would do on staging, yeah, to make sure like, okay, cool. We did this in development, let's test on staging now, let's throw something at it. Does it fall over? Nope, looks good. And then we can
throw something at it. Can you actually replay live events from production into the staging to see if it handles the load or not really?
No, I wouldn't say we're capturing events in that way.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not like a replay log.
Yeah.
Fair. Yep.
For marketing the app for creators, who is that exactly?
Yeah. YouTuber, you have a podcast, maybe do graphic design, you have a paid product. Yeah. Someone that fits in that bubble. Yeah, essentially. Solopreneurs, yeah, for sure.
So, coming from a company that switched from GCP to AWS, is there any specific reason you picked GCP instead of AWS when you're developing Rangle?
To be honest, even before the banking product, we were already on GCP. That was kind of a tech decision I inherited. That being said, I really actually prefer it. And working with some security consultants, they said, oh, you're on GCP? Great, that makes life easier for me because there's a lot of built-in security features of GCP, so yeah.
So, like, I'm curious about how you remembered all this. It's like I've fought battles before, and then I just kind of come out of it when it's done, and I have no idea what happened.
Yeah, I think this time I wanted to capture what was happening. Again, with Benji Financial, there's a lot of battles we went through that similarly kind of after a week or so kind of forget what happened. But when this was coming up, it was just myself, so I'm like, hey, I need to kind of document this. So yeah, thankfully I was able to do that, and then yeah, to do the talk on it. Oh, thank you.
Traumas, probably?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I need to get better at my commit messages. Like, yeah, commit message 1, commit message 2, kind of thing. You had a question? Hopefully sooner than later. Hopefully sooner than later. Cool.
How about you able to sort of connect to different banks, like using their APIs, or how do you fetch data?
Yeah, so that's again one of the platforms that we use helps us connect to all those connections. Yeah, so we went with again something that was, in our opinion, proven and available in multiple markets. There's a few players in this space, but yeah.
If you're using Play,
That's one of the ones we're looking at. Yeah.
I saw it on the previous slide.
Oh, okay, interesting. So if nobody caught that. Yeah. Go for it.
So like, do you store the transactions locally, or did you make the tech decision to leave them, like, to only run the intelligence when it's needed, and then like only capture the data that you need for the intelligence to get?
No, we store it, and then run the intelligence on top of it. But yeah, I think pinging our partner every time and then having to run the intelligence again on request or on demand would prove to be a little bit tough to do over time. So, yeah.
Quick question. We talked about enriching the transaction data in the process a lot. Could you elaborate on what exactly that process looks like? I understand you're importing, let's say, an Excel spreadsheet of my business account transactions. What does the enrichment process of that data for your purposes would imply?
All I can say on that is we take that raw data, and again, if you look at your bank statement, you might see the description is something that you don't really recognize, right? I might have like, I don't know, Rogers, Bill, and then your account number. Not very useful for later, so we take that, we'll clean it up. We have some logic around that. And then any information that we're missing in order to make an informed decision on what category this would fall under for tax purposes, we'll go out and get that data, attach it, and then be able to present that to the user. But yeah, can't go into too much more detail than that. Yeah.
So you say you work with banking partners in the sense that you have people log into their bank accounts and you work with them. How are you dealing with the ever-evolving banking 2FA problem where you're no longer having access to the personal verification question backup to various banks?
Yeah, I say we benefit from using a platform that kind of abstracts that away from us, so we don't have to worry about that too much. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Thank you all again.